when you have been deeply hurt by someone that you love? How do you know when you have forgiven them? Does the pain stop?
Well, sister, thank you so much for that question. I think this is a question that a lot of people have. There's a lot of teaching we need on forgiveness. Pastor Glaze.
Well, I heard in her voice that, she was going through a lot of pain. Yeah. And I just want to begin by saying that the pain does subside. Right. Again, I know it's a cliche, but, time does heal wounds, but in that time, I think that the way you process things determines how long you experience that pain. Mm-hmm. When we think about forgiveness, I tell people this, it's like you take the other person that hurt you and you put them in a cage in your soul, and that they continue to eat away at your inside. They continue to grab your heart and grab your soul. I said at some point you have to open that cage and let them out. And then when you let them out, then that's when that forgiving process begins. And so there's two things that you can do. You can either take a payment, and when you take a payment, that means that you continue to hold that person responsible. You continue to be bitter with them, you continue to be upset with them, and as long as you do that, you'll struggle with forgiveness. Or you can make a payment. You can say that, I choose to forgive you, I choose to release you, I choose to let you go. And then as you do that, that cage of your soul becomes open, and that forgiveness is able to flow freely.
Well, that's a good illustration. Pete.
Dr. Dobbins taught that if this betrayal happens to be intimacy-wise, he says it usually, what he discovered, it usually takes up to 5 years to really, really work through this. And I agree with what Doc said. You have to be intentional. You have to come. Remember what Jesus said? He said, when you stand praying, what's the very first thing he said? Forgive. So, and the best way for that to work out, and again, every pastor on this panel has been hurt deeply. Every one of us have been hurt, especially probably a very close friend. And the thing is, in that betrayal, you can't allow a root of bitterness to come in. And the only way you can combat a root of bitterness is got to be conquered through love and praying and believing the best for them. Yeah. Love conquers all. I know it's a cliche, but it's the truth. You have to work through it.
Well, let me ask you about forgiveness. What about this? I mean, how does it work? I mean, what are we really doing? I mean, how can we forgive someone that they might not even be asking for forgiveness?
Well, I think that's one of the things you have to define too. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. So a lot of times we can love somebody so much we're like, how do I know if I've forgiven them? And you're wanting to forgive somebody that you shouldn't let back in your life too. So that's
a big point.
Right? That's huge because a lot of times people are like, oh, you're thinking if I love them enough, if I just do enough for them, somehow they'll change and we can work this out. And it doesn't mean you haven't forgiven, it just means maybe they're not who you want them to be. So I think the forgiveness piece though is simple. That's between you and God about releasing them from what they've done. But the healing part, that takes time. So forgiveness and no pain aren't always equal. Yeah. So you can say, I've forgiven them, but I got to heal. Yeah. So sometimes what you need distance from that person. You've got to give yourself an opportunity. Just like if you were to break a bone, they have to reset it. You put it in a cast. You can't use it like you did before. That's got to take some time in order to do that.
Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to trust that person. You're just not letting that hang on to you any longer.
I like what you guys said. It takes time. But probably every one of us here, when you're a young pastor, that's probably the best place to start this, is you get hurt. You get betrayed. People leave the church. Yeah. And in the beginning, you think, my God, am I gonna live through this? And then you get hurt more and more, and you get more arrows thrown. And it's like you got a target on your chest. But you know what? What you learn out of that, the pain is, guard your heart with all diligence, because out of it comes the issues of life. You have to learn to, let go. That's what Jesus said. Let go, forgive. If anyone offends you in the Beatitudes, he said they'll revile you, you'll betray you. Right. Pray for them. Yeah. So I believe that pain, as time heals, that pain, when that thing will pop up, that person will pop up in your mind. You'll see him at the grocery store, and I bind you, devil. But, when you're first in the ministry, but now you can walk in love because it's shed abroad in your heart. But I think if you really let it go, you can look at that person, smile, you're welcome to come, you're welcome to go. My confidence is in Christ, and I'm quick to forgive. That 70 times 7 is a day. So that 490 times is a day. It's like, so when that thing pops up, you got to go, that was dealt with. I have no animosity. And I say out loud, I bless that person. And that person in ministry, that youth pastor that left and said a bunch of stuff, I say, I bless him. I bless his kids. I bless his wife. I ask you to prosper him. And all of a sudden the devil's like, that little voice is gone because you're doing what the word says. Bless those who curse you. And that's the best way to get through the pain.
Or
worship
through use you.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, it's a couple of things. One is, you know, when I was 16, I took a spill and I had a scar on my shoulder. It really hurt. My shoulder hurt really bad. And then a little while later, it didn't hurt anymore. The scar was still there. You could see the scar, but it didn't hurt anymore, you know? And so God can heal that. You're always going to remember certain things. That's just the way our mind works. But God can heal that to where that pain isn't there anymore. And you know, and like we said, don't expect that you're going to forget, or don't expect that you need to let that person back in your life. You may want them, or you may not want them, and you're like, oh, do I have to let them back in? No, you don't. You're not letting that person's bad choices in the past affect your present or your future anymore, right? It's no longer, like you said, Pastor Glaze, it's set free. You've been set free from that. So let's go on to the next question.